Written for the May 2022 monthly writing contest in the category The Best Laid Plans. So, there was my ship's chief engineer, lying naked on an altar with her tits covered in barbecue sauce. I took a moment to appreciate the sight before gunning down the cultists, who were surging through the temple's opposite door. Blaster bolts and gobbets of half-burned Dahu flesh pattering off the walls. Until my 4-second burst had choked the entrance with enough pudgy yellow bodies to block their passage. The temple sanctuary was fairly spacious, not to mention ornate to the point of tackiness, but Dahu are fast on their feet given a straight run. Best to keep them suppressed at the choke points. Hargren. You took your time getting here, you shaggy-assed clapgoblin. My loyal and valued chief engineer tends to express herself with a certain pungent creativity when she's pissed off, which is approximately always. You hear so much about humans being such inherent diplomats and mediators, but Ophelia Walchak is about as conciliating as a sudden kick to the twat. No, scratch that. There are probably more people who enjoy blunt force trauma to the fun bits than people who would willingly put up with Opie. I only do it because she's pretty much a savant, a downright fucking master level philosopher when it comes to starship engines. Well, that and because she's handy in a fight. And, yeah, a hell of a drinking buddy, I'll admit. And in the right moods, she can be fucking hilarious to be around. But a certain amount of baggage comes with all that. Namely, that she is a bitchy foul-tempered harridan with an unconcealed superiority complex and absolutely no fashion sense. Seriously. The whole bare-assed but for titty sauce look was the best dressed I'd seen her in years. Ah, close your face hole, you insufferable pain in the cooch, I politely commiserated. I slung a couple more blaster bolts through the doorway as I moved over to the altar. Opie was fastened securely to it with some simple, but stout manacles, and not the fun fuzzy kind either. The attached chains were theatrically chunky and rust-spangled. Just the sort of shit you'd expect to find on a cult's black marble altar. With Opie's big blonde naked self writhing on top of it, the whole scene looked like the cover of some trashy adventure novel. Except for the barbecue sauce. That just made Opie look like a fucking idiot. There was no way I'd ever let her forget this. As the old saying goes, we Zhargs love three things. Legalisms, bureaucratic nitpicking, and forever bringing up our friends' embarrassing shit. A Dahu cultist ran out onto a balcony overhead, her pretentious robe flapping around her tripedal yellow body, as she tried to draw a bead on me with a Gauss rifle. I put a burst into her face before she'd made 3 steps. The first 2 bolts went through her single huge eye, and the last 3 blew out the back of her skull. The body flipped over the railing to splat on the marble floor 20 feet below. I looked at the chains and the barbecue sauce again, and offered my dear friend and longtime comrade a sneer that took up fully half my muzzle. So, I said. Your mission was proceeding as planned, you said. You had a contact inside the cult, you said. You were going to pull off an infiltration, you said. A furious roar of heavy automatic weapons fire from outside the temple interrupted me, my trusty gal's hard at work. The venomous look Opie was shooting at me was more dangerous than the stray rounds the cultists were popping into the room. I am totally going to rip your ears off and cram them up, your festering snatch, you brain-dead strumpet, Opie growled as soon as we could hear ourselves again. Oh, how she hates hearing, I told you so. Promises, promises. So, are you supposed to be their virgin sacrifice, or what? I mean, with your face and personality, I can see why any reasonable sapient would assume you've never ever been laid. Hargren, I swear by the saints, I will murder you and then jill off on your grave if you don't get me loose from here right fucking now. Yeah, neither of those things would be happening anytime soon. The cultists had dragged enough bodies out of that rear entrance to try and assault through there again. Not to stereotype, but you've got to give Dahu their due, they don't do belief halfway. When they pick a religion or ideology, they'll stick to it right to the uttermost end. Dahu make awesome missionaries and will be active political leaders in any society they live in. But when they buy into some crazy shit like a devil cult or oligarchic communism or some such, they can turn into the worst sorts of fanatics. And fanatics are annoying to fight precisely because they ride that shit to the end instead of realizing, oh no, actual competent military forces are tearing us up like fresh pussy when the fleet's in port. Maybe we could consider giving up and living to see another day. But no, they're always, we will die to the last idiot for the glory of Bufu the unholy or the party dialectic or whatever. Fighting against fanatics is a tedious business. Lucrative, but tedious. This particular bunch of beer-oaked shitbags was both more annoying and more lucrative than most. They called themselves ultimologists and worshipped the ghost of a supposed once and future galactic dictator, who would occasionally incarnate into various critters. I guess to relieve the boredom of awaiting his prophesied return. The local rulers, like most of the less evil governments in the galaxy, were all live and let live when it came to belief systems. But these ultimologists had been aggressively recruiting among the star system's rich and influential classes. You know, unemployed trust fund scions, airhead 3V actors and entertainers, opportunistic socialites and grifters. The usual suspects when you're looking for overfilled bank accounts and unfulfilled souls. There's nothing in this universe more likely to bring on catastrophe than motivated idiots with plentiful resources and a certainty of their own righteousness. The planetary government weren't complete fools. They could see what was coming, with the cult constantly gaining access and influence at the higher levels of power. A couple of investigators had gone missing. Some prominent ultimology critics had their homes burned and families killed. Then an employee of a high-profile ultimologist entertainment mogul was caught trying to source lethal plague-type nanobits and committed suicide before he could be interrogated. It was clearly time to move against the group, but with the extent of ultimologist penetration of the government and military bureaucracy and networks not fully understood, what was needed was some outsiders. A highly competent and aggressive combat force that was at once unconnected to the local socio-political scene and completely deniable, yet also utterly dependable once brought in. Well, when people in this galactic arm think, I need a dangerous enemy dead, and I need it right fucking now, they think Hargren of Stormhill and her merry crew. Some media ass rammer once dubbed me Queen of the Mercenaries, but that's bullshit. Calling me Queen implies some kind of profession-spanning leadership role, which private military contractors are far too varied and contentious to have. I'm not Queen of the Mercenaries in any way. I'm just the fucking best. Also the sexiest. But mostly best. A couple of Dahu cultists, young and stupid looking, came smashing through one of the big prismatic windows on my right, clearly trying to flank me. They were followed by a shifty-looking Jixavin in the uniform of the cult's hired security force. All three were carrying large-bore riot guns, the two Dumbuses at the low ready, the security guard shouldered and ready to go. He got a shot off that missed closely enough to throw marble splinters into my body armor. And apparently into OP's ample butt cheek, judging by the profane howling from the altar. I cut down the two Dahu before they could even aim at me, but that gave the reptiloid security guy time to go to cover behind a massive column. My pulse pistol couldn't chew through the hefty stonework, and even if he just hung his barrel around the corner and blind fired in our direction, it would be a real problem. Especially with the next rush of idiots coming through that back door at any moment. Ah, well. Stuff like that is why the gods granted us the gift of underbarrel grenade launchers, as proof that they love us and want us to have fun. The mini grenade launcher under an Axial Industries Model 31 Justifier pulse pistol isn't very big, but for the sort of close assault combat the Justifier excels at, you don't want or need huge explosions everywhere. I aimed just beside and beyond the column and hit the secondary trigger. There was a chunk and a boom and a spray of blood, scales, and at least one leg from behind the pillar. Seeing that brought back fond memories of my very first pirate hunt. Heh. My 13th birthday was so awesome. Hargren, I'm serious, OP snarled as the ringing from the explosion faded. Get me off this fucking heathen altar right now. I'm a good Catholic and don't want the Holy Virgin or Jan Paul to get the wrong idea. I had to laugh at that. Good Catholic. Bitch, just hearing your confessions has sent 2 priests to the psych ward. They've had to invent whole new rites of penance just for the shit you do. There was a stir of activity at that rear doorway, rising voices, and the thudding of feet from the corridor beyond. Oh boy. I gave OP a swat on the hip as I slipped over to a better firing position. Now shut up, you absolute termagant, or I'll use you as cover. Gods know you're thick enough. I could hear a voice from beyond that doorway. Loud, ringing, and kind of familiar sounding. Some inspiring leader was exhorting the faithful to follow him. Something about adepts and awakened powers and proving their devotion and all kinds of shit like that. Just a flowery way of saying, let's go get killed when you got down to it. And that's exactly what they did. Ahu came pouring through that doorway in a rush, pulse carbines held at hip level with triggers down, randomly spraying bolts at everything. The altar. The pews. The ceiling. Each other. Yeah, high volume unaimed fire, tightly packed ranks, and an onrushing column formation is pretty much a recipe for taking friendly fire up the ass. About a third of the ultimologists who came through that door died without me doing a thing to them. Funny, but also a bit disappointing, you know. I mean, I didn't take this job to not shoot people. I did shoot plenty, though. In fact, I could barely keep up as I kept my pistol firing at the cyclic rate, only stopping to swap out power packs. They just kept charging and dying, young and old, men and women. A wild-eyed matron took 2 bolts to the chest and kept on coming, waving a bloody cleaver over her head and throwing random fire with the carbine she was one-handing. A bolt through the head finally put her down hard within spitting distance of me. A well-dressed university boy, who I'd somehow missed, knelt on his center leg and drew a bead on Opie. He was just stroking the trigger when I managed to pop him through the throat. That familiar voice I'd heard turned out to be a certain top-level Dahu 3V actor best known for superhero movies. I hate superhero movies. So, suffice it to say that while the character of Mutant Guardian might be blaster-proof, the guy who played him, not so much. It was touch and go there for a bit. Dahu cultists were wailing and whooping and dying. Guns were hammering. Blood and marble dust filled the air. The wounded groaned and gasped. And a low growl of profanity and mixed galactophonic and diaspora Polish emanated continually from the altar top. The fighting reached a crescendo as my pulse pistol grew almost too hot to hold, and it became nearly impossible to walk without stepping on dead or writhing bodies. And then, just like that, it ended. Combat is weird like that. Sometimes it winds down in a slow spattering of gunfire, other times it hits a peak and then cuts out like a light switch. Bodies stopped coming and I stopped shooting and it just ended. From outside, I could hear the chattering of my crew's auto weapons moving away into the furthest reaches of the ultimologist compound. The sounds of return fire had died away to almost nothing. Good. That meant this shit was nearly over. Yo, Opie. I called as I rose from my firing post behind a Duralloy water basin. You still alive? No thanks to you, you fuzzy bag of STDs. Yeah, she sounded healthy and normal. I hope they shot your clit off. Healthy and normal for a sour-assed old bundle of bitchiness, I mean. Yeah, I said as I made my way back to her. If you're gonna talk dirty like that, pull my fur. I regarded her for a long moment, contemplating the sight before me. You know, I had it in mind that all the blood and dead bodies and stuff might add some gravitas to this scene. Some profundity or commentary on the sapient condition. The juxtaposition of the nude and bound female form surrounded by the aftermath of strife and slaughter. But no. You still just look like a naked idiot with barbecue sauce on her tits. I am not an idiot. Of course not. You ended up in this position because you're a fucking genius, and this is some 6-dimensional chess game shit, right? Seriously, how did you even manage this? Opie's teeth ground so hard, I was afraid she'd spit enamel dust on me. I was deceived. Deceived and betrayed. I waggled my whiskers at her. So, you got totally outplayed then, miss. All of a sudden I'm an infiltration expert. Oh, fuck you in every hole. Opie always gets sulky and shifty-eyed when you see right through her. This contact of yours within the cult. You were thinking with your twat, weren't you? Got led around by the gash, I'll bet. Opie's pale face had gone bright red. About half of it was anger. But only half. And she still couldn't meet my eye. I had to laugh. No choice, really. So, I asked right when she was about to start cursing me again, was she hot? Opie took a deep breath and let her jaw unclench a little. For a Dahu, her jugs were amazing, she answered, sounding just a tiny bit regretful. Pert. Bouncy. As big as my head. I can fault Ophelia Walchak for lots of things, but her taste in chicks is pretty solid. I just clucked my tongue at her. Ah. The classic tragedy. Beguiled by tits and led to your doom. What would Rinhala say if she knew? Rinhalari Shangara was a new member of my crew that OP and I'd both had our eyes on, a Felra gunnery specialist of intriguing beauty, amazing bloodlust, and a prosthetic tail made of armor-grade duralloy. According to Rinhala, her original tail had to be amputated because it got pulped when she used it to beat a dozen Rabathi slave raiders to death. Apparently her hands were bound at the time. With a metal tail, I can beat as many people as I want to death and not worry about it, she'd explained. So naturally OP and I had both been anxious to get into her panties, because how could you not want to fuck someone like that? But for once, OP didn't rise to my bait. "Oh, like you'd have done any better, you Pomeranian-faced Harry biscuit," she grumped, rattling her manacles impatiently. "You can say that when I'm the one with barbecue sauce on my tits. How did it even happen, anyway? If you must know, the galactic dictator Zambu has apparently been incarnated as." At that moment, a blood-spattered Dahu who'd been playing dead and who I think used to be on some 3V sitcom as a bumbling uncle or something got up and lunged toward a lever about halfway to the altar. I just caught the words, "Mighty Zambu" in whatever nonsense. He was wailing before I cut him down with a burst across the thighs. As he buckled, he flung himself forward and just managed to clutch the lever before I gave him a finisher through the forehead. His dying weight slumped forward, shifting the lever and causing a section of wall to slide open, revealing incarnated as an armored Spagda beast. OP finished with a sigh as 2 tons of 6-legged keratin-armored, saber-fanged, slavering murder stepped out of the concealed cage. The Spagda beast was a predator native to this plane and known for eating entire herds of grazing ungulates. They were big, fast, well protected, and had mouths big enough to throw cushions in and use as furniture. Their hides were nearly blaster-proof. Big game hunters regularly sought them out, and about a third of the time, those hunters didn't come back. I'd have been terrified of it if I wasn't Hargren of Clan Stormhill, and therefore by definition the scariest living thing on this planet. The Spagda beast opened its mouth to roar at me, to make fear and panic overcome me so that I would seek to flee and then be brought down once I'd turned my unprotected back to my attacker. That's how it worked in the natural world. But you know what? Fuck nature. Sapient didn't get to where we are by following that bitch's silly little rules. So, when the Spagda beast roared at me, I just grimaced at the sound and smell, raised my pistol, and fired mini grenades from the underbarrel launcher down its gullet until the magazine ran dry. The Spagda beast's hide might be thick and armored, but not so its innards. The 4 mini grenades went off one after the other, whump, inside the thing's upper digestive tract. A cloud of blood blew out its mouth, while a spray of pulped organs and tissue shot out its other end like the worst shart you ever saw. It swayed on its feet for a second as I snagged another mini grenade mag from my belt, then it fell over with a clatter, its own blood and waste mingling on the floor with that of its worshippers. And that, children, is why threat displays are for suckers. So, that was their god, huh? I asked Opie. Yeah. She was glaring at the Spagda beast like it had just made a pass at her dad. Fucking heathens. They were feeding live sacrifices to it. And apparently, their scripture says that the mighty Zambu loved him some barbecue sauce, so now I understand. Right. So, you realize that I'm not actually an idiot, then? Oh, no. You're still a fucktard for ending up like this. I just understand the exact scope of your fucktardation now. Damn you, Hargren. Opie was too pissed off to even shout at me anymore. She'd reached the cold, hissing threat stage if she'd call it rage, but I call it peevishness meh. If people survive it, it isn't really a rage. When I get loose from here, I am going to shove your head so far up your own cunt that even you won't enjoy it. Well, that's not much incentive for me to help you out of there, is it? I gave her one of my cheekiest grins, because they're charming and sexy, and she hates them. I cannot believe what a bitch you are being about this, she snarled. You'd do the exact same thing to me if I were the one chained down. I would not. What about that time on Tementhra when the Popular Front set the brothel on fire? Not the same thing. I didn't taunt you while you were naked and in danger. I just stared at her. Was that really how she was going to play it? She huffed. Fine. But I didn't taunt you as much as you're taunting me, did I? Opie considered for a second, then turned her head with a defeated shit. Indeed. OP sighed and tried to wriggle to a more comfortable position, having accepted her well-earned fate. So, then, I stay like this until… Oh, I don't know. I waved a hand around airily. Not too long, I guess. Just long enough for the crew to come in here and appreciate what you and I have both accomplished here. Especially Rinhala. OP's head snapped back to me. Oh ho. So, that's what this is all about. You're trying to maneuver me out of the way and yourself into Rinhala's bed. Now who's letting their vag do their thinking? It's called strategy, my dear. Being good at it is why I get paid the big bucks. And it's all done here. I tapped myself on the head. Now, the conniving might be pussy-centric, I'll grant, but it's all led by logic. I said not to think with your vag. I never said to accept no input from it. Right after I said that, the temple doors opened behind me, and 4 members of my crew entered, weapons up and ready to rock. Honka, the Jixavin ex-commerce guard officer, who commanded my ship's boarding party, was leading them, a carbine in her lower hands and a pulse pistol in each upper one. She looked more like a pirate than an ex-cop. A couple of armored riflewomen followed, the orange one a Tarkaj defector named Rukn, the fuzzy one a Zharg, who called herself Ace and who everybody assumed was related to me, but wasn't. As far as I know, anyway. And bringing up the rear, my ship's new gunner and heavy weapon specialist, the lovely Rinhala. Felra, even scar-faced and perpetually angry ones like Rinhala, can make any wardrobe look good. Somehow, the woman managed to make semi-powered combat armor and the harness for a portable autocannon look slinky on her. 4 luscious and muscular legs, if you're into legs. 4 perky breasts like little green sugar fruits, if you're into boobs. A taut and rounded butt that's basically always bent over, because she's a centauroid, if you're into butts. And a thick but supple metal tail for beating people to death, if you're into violent psychopaths. Let's just say that Rinhala checked all my boxes. We've secured the outer compound, Captain Honka reported as she came up. We're beginning a sweep of the buildings, but most of the defending forces are accounted for already. As you predicted, they threw everything they had at us in uncoordinated counterattacks as soon as we landed. She glanced at Opie, neither her expression nor the calm neutral green of her facial chromatophores changing a bit at the sight of Opie's naked and saucy self. I see you've secured Chief Engineer Walchak. Yep, I replied. And she's in just exactly the same condition as when I found her. A low-voiced "Suka" was Opie's only comment on that. Indeed. It takes a lot to rattle Honka. She didn't even give Opie a second glance. By your leave, then, I'll take Ace and Rokna and clear the rear section of this building. Rinhala, secure this site, then post by the captain to defend or assist as needed. And with that, she led the 2 riflewomen cautiously through that rear door, picking their way over and around the bodies I'd strewn there. I sidled over to Rinhala, making sure to stride with a bold and commanding awesomeness that befit a badass like myself. And I think I succeeded, even if I did stumble on a squishy Dahu corpse or 2. Let Opie stew in her jealous juices. I had hot green booty to chase. Rinhala stood surveying the room, infantry support autocannon held at the ready, in case she needed to knock through some walls or something. So, I purred, enjoying your first big operation with us. I hope you've been having as good a time as I have. I waved at the carnage I'd wrought in the rear half of the temple. It represented an ample afternoon's labor. Rinhala, to my surprise and chagrin, did not immediately check out my work as indicated, but simply continued her methodical visual scan of the room with a polite, "Yes, ma'am." She was professional all right. A bit stiff, but professional. Ah, well. She'd get to it in a moment and be suitably impressed, the first step to a panty-dropping future. And sure enough, after a bitter examination reached the area around the altar, and I heard her give a little gasp. Aha. Not so stoic and professional after all, eh? I stepped a little closer to her. Lovely work, isn't it? I asked. I thought I saw her hips give the slightest little wiggle, and her tongue moisten her lips before she replied. Very much so, ma'am. I'm most impressed by everything I see. I didn't say, ha. Suck it, Opie. Out loud. But I really wanted to. It was 5 days after we wiped out the ultimologists. We were back in space aboard the Harlot's Blade, and outbound from the system, contract complete and flush with cash. There was, as you might expect, significant fallout in the aftermath of the planetary government having a third party conduct violent military operations against their own citizens. Even if those citizens were up to very bad things. But that's why I have clauses in every contract. I take that state that I get paid and am gone as soon as combat operations are concluded. I'm a mercenary, not a cop. My job is to break things and kill people. I don't testify, attend hearings, or explain myself after the fact. And if anyone tries to make me, they should refer to the previous point regarding what my job entails, or risk me working some more. So, being that I was feeling jolly, rich, and oh so horny, I decided to pay my lovely new gunner a little unannounced visit. An assignation, if you will, in her personal quarters. A little face-to-face time with her captain to help her get settled in. Some intense sloppy girl sex, I certainly hoped. So, in my tastiest mini dress and my favorite cavalry boots, the ones with the heels and the pointy toes, I sauntered down to Rinhala's cabin. I took a moment to make sure my ears were fluffed and facing forward, my fur and whiskers straight, and my chest flood nicely exposed. Once I was sure I was at my sexiest and most irresistible, I tapped the door to swish it open. I stepped inside and Rinhala was stripped to the waist and slathering her entire front with peanut butter, an unlocked set of security cuffs dangling from one wrist. And right in front of her. Hargren, you mouth-breathing slutsicle. Do you not know how to fucking knock? Yeah. So, there was my ship's chief engineer, lying naked on an altar with her tits covered in barbecue sauce. Author's name and the link to original text in the description. Consider tapping the thumbs up and pressing the subscribe button if you enjoyed this video. And please join our channel.